let's move on and talk a little bit about how government attempts to manage macroeconomic variables. So, what we're going to, in an unregulated economy, in an unregulated macro economy, you have these fluctuations in the business cycle, so that you have, periods of growth followed by periods of contraction, followed by periods of growth, contraction, etc. Okay? Now, when these periods of growth, when it becomes extremely, accelerated, and the economy is overheating, so to speak, economists call those inflationary periods. Okay? And when the economy contracts, when it gets, economists have actually some specific indicators of this, but, a certain number of quarters of zero or negative economic growth, they call that recession. Okay? Now, you don't have to be an economist to know that most Americans have some very basic understanding that both inflation and recession are bad. We would like to avoid both inflation and recession. Okay? In the early part of the 20th century, a British economist by the name of John Maynard Keynes argued that maybe there are some things that government can do in order to smooth out these fluctuations in the business cycle. So we've got inflation, we've got recession, and by the way, if recession gets deep enough, we call it a depression, like we had in the 1930s. Okay? But Keynes argued maybe there are some things that government can do to sort of smooth out these fluctuations in the business cycle. We're not going to completely we're not going to completely get rid of recession. We're not going to completely get rid of inflation, but maybe we can make it manageable, sort of smooth out these dramatic swings in the business cycle, therefore sort of manage the economy. Okay. Now, Keynes, there you see a picture of Keynes, developed his general theory of equilibrium in the early part of the 20th century, and I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible in the interest of time, but also just for the sake of simplicity. Keynes explained that these dramatic fluctuations in the business cycle are a result, we're talking now about an unregulated economy, a pure capitalist economy. These fluctuations in the business cycle result from imbalances between what he called aggregate demand and productive capacity. Okay? If you've taken an economics course, you have learned that economists like to characterize the market of a good or represent the market of a good graphically in this fashion. So they'll say, okay, we've got a market for some good, and this is not showing up very well because let me get a different marker. That's a little better. So they'll say, okay, here we've got a market for some good, and so they'll draw a demand curve and a supply curve like this. And they'll say the point at which these two curves intersect is the market equilibrium, which is a condition that's satisfied when you have quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Okay? I don't want to digress too much into an economics lesson here, but for those of you who have taken economics, you probably know exactly what I mean. If you haven't taken economics, you will take economics. Okay? Or maybe those of you who are out at Louise will take economics because that's a part of the requirement for the high school diploma, right? But whether you take it at the college level is another matter. Okay? So I don't want to digress too much in the economic analysis, but just the point I'm trying to make here is what they're talking about is market equilibrium. The market for some good, whether that is orange juice or dry erase markers or apparel or backpacks or college textbooks or restaurant meals or eyeglasses or smartphones or automobiles, whatever it is, the market for some good, they typically represent, in this fashion, reflecting the law of demand and the law of supply. Okay? But again, what I want you to focus on is this idea of market equilibrium. Okay? Now, if we take the market for automobiles and add that to the market for college textbooks and eyeglasses and orange juice and apparel items and stereo systems and all the other goods and services that are produced by the economy, okay? We take the demand for in each one of those markets, okay, for each of the particular goods or services, and we add it all up. That's aggregate demand. Aggregate means everything together, okay, everything taken together. But Keynes says that that's a really kind of a hard concept to get a handle on. It's kind of hard to conceptualize, adding up all that, all those individual markets. So he suggests a shortcut way, sort of a more convenient way to think about aggregate demand. He says we want to think about aggregate demand as the total amount of money available in the economy to be spent on goods and services. You know, you imagine like consumers with money in their wallet or in their pocketbook. They want to spend it on goods and services. You add all that up, you've got aggregate demand. The total amount of money available in the economy to be spent on goods and services. Productive capacity is the total value of goods and services that can be produced by the economy when it works at full employment. Productive capacity is the total value of goods and services that can be produced by the economy when it works at full employment. Now, full employment means that the economy, full employment means that the economy is using all of the inputs available to it in the production of goods and services. And those inputs include the labor supply. Okay? That's straightforward enough. Everybody probably has a pretty good sense of what I mean by the labor supply. The human effort that is applied in the production of goods and services. But we also have capital. Capital is not money. That's not what an economist means by capital. Lay people sometimes use the word capital, when they're talking about money. Let's go out to lunch. I don't have any capital. Right? That's not what an economist means by capital. An economist capital means any good or service that's used in the production of another good or service. So, for example, a nail gun on a construction site is capital. A saw on a construction site is capital. An oven in a bakery is capital. An accounting software program in a tax office is capital. The computers are capital. Okay, does that make sense? So any good or service that's used in the production of another good or service is capital. Okay? And then finally, natural resources. And that's probably straightforward enough. Okay, so every economy, the American economy, the British economy, the French economy, the German economy, the Japanese economy, the Canadian economy, the Venezuelan economy, I don't care, add to the list your favorite country, right? Any country's economy has a certain supply of labor, capital, and natural resources. When all of the labor supply and all of the capital stock and all of the natural resources are being used in the production of goods and services, the economy is operating at full employment. That make sense? That's what the concept of full employment means.